Welcome to the world of the 66 Kids. We're still kicking it. And my name is Bob Boze Bell. I'm here with Stuart Rosebrook, and we're going to talk about two-lane tales. Are you excited about this, Stuart?
Oh, yeah. There's nothing like a two-lane road. I get off the interstate as fast as I can anywhere I go.
Well, I have a master on today. We have a guest who has been up and down this road so many times, not even funny. He's written 22 books about the Mother Road. And I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Jim Hinckley. How you doing, compadre?
You know, my friend, I'm doing pretty good. The funny thing is I had a pulse earlier. I can't seem to find it now. But
Now, Jim lives in Kingman. I grew up in Kingman. The only difference between us is that there's a statue to Jim in downtown Kingman at the train station. And Jim, tell us a little bit about how you got into this gig of being Mr. Route 66.
You know, it's a funny thing, kind of like with your life. Pretty much everything in my life since about 1959 somehow has been tied to Route 66. And when I first started writing, my dearest friend, my wife, encouraged me to try writing. And I started out writing about the American auto industry. I've had a passion for that from about 1885 to 1940. And they started to overlap. I've traveled a lot, and people said I had a gift for telling people where to go. And so I started blending my tales of automotive history with stories of travel on Route 66 and other roads. And they overlapped, like Edsel Ford's trip in 1915 on the National Old Trails Road followed what became Route 66 in 1926.
Wow, that's fantastic. And tell us a little bit about your favorite places on the road. Do you have a stretch or any kind of two-lane that's real endearing to you?
Well, you know, it's kind of partial to me. That stretch on the pre-52 alignment of Route 66 up through the Black Mountains, going through Oatman, Gold Road, up that direction. I think Stevie Wonder would have trouble taking a bad photo up there. It's pretty spectacular. And of course, I got personal. My first paid job was on Ed's camp, working for Ed Edgerton. My pa had a tendency to teach us things like time to swim, throw you out of the boat thing. And I learned to drive on that road.
Oh, my goodness. Because I remember in the movie Edge of Eternity, 1959, Cornell Wilde, and they filmed it in the Kingman area. And they had a camera in a car of a 60 T-Bird, I think it was. Oh, no, it's a 59. And they'd go through that hairpin, and it was, I remember in the theater, seeing that in the theater, and everybody's like, oh, because the hairpins on that road are ridiculous.
It's the steepest grades and the sharpest curves anywhere on Route 66.
Wow.
So, Jim, this is Stuart Rosebrook. You know, I grew up in Los Angeles, and Bob and I have compared notes about our fathers getting us up really early in the morning and driving east. Our station wagon only went east from Los Angeles to Phoenix, maybe would go north to Flagstaff, maybe to Tucson, and somewhere in between, and then back on I-10. But long before I-10 was US 60, and so spent a lot of time on those two-lane roads crossing the desert. And so I wanted to know a little bit about where you grew up, Jim, and what brought your family to Route 66.
Well, two things real quick. My pa always said it's better to fill the head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. And when Route 66 the U.S. highway system was first created, Route 66 was designated US 60. And there was a little bit of a political compromise needed to get everything done, so they renumbered the highway as US 66. As far as how I got here, I'm originally from North Carolina. I've been out here in this country since mid-'60s. I've been out here long enough to be one of the dry roasted nuts, I suppose. But I can't make this stuff up. I'm not that imaginative. My pa was a Navy in World War II and then Coast Guard on the Great Lakes. And in 1966, of all things, he mustered out of the service, said he'd had enough of the water, and he literally folded a map and threw a dart. and the closest it was Yucca, Arizona. So just like he emulated the grapes of wrath, bought some property sight unseen, which turned out to be along the old Oatman Highway, which was Route 66, and bought himself an old junk truck out of the wrecking yard and put it together. Well, we moseyed west Kingman, Arizona.
Wow.
How about that? That echoes the story we heard early today of Marshall Trimble's family's trip from Tempe to Ash Fork. So what did you think, Jim, when you arrived there? How old were you when you got to...
Yeah, I was just shy of 10. And even as a kid, I grew up, spent a lot of time on folks' farms down in Alabama, Tennessee, and I was used to some backwards things. But being a kid from back east in the hills of Tennessee, Michigan, when I first moved to Kingman, I thought this was the place they warned me about in Sunday school. And it didn't help that we moved out in the middle of the Sacramento Valley along Route 66. And
so he really, your father really did, the dart hit Yucca, Arizona, and so you went to Yucca. That your land was adjacent there, is that right?
No, it was over on the Oatman Road.
Yeah, but that's a stone's throw from Yucca, isn't it? It's not that far.
It's within spitting distance.
Yeah. Tell us some history about that area that we might not know.
Well, it's really interesting. That road, the pre-52 alignment of Route 66 was put in 1921 to bypass the National Old Trails Road, which you can still see below the grade. The original road, the National Old Trails Road from 13 to 21, had 26% grades.
Wow.
So they had cut that down, but a lot of great history. There was the Desert Classic automobile race that they called the Cactus Derby. It took place from 1909 to 1914, and it followed a different course every year across the desert, L.A. to Phoenix. But 1914, they followed the National Old Trails Road up through Oatman, through the Black Mountains, and attracted some of the big boys, race car drivers like Louis Chevrolet and Barney Oldfield.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I mentioned Edsel Ford. Just like people traveling Route 66, they wanted to see live Indians and national parks and painted desert. They followed the National Trails Road. So in 1915, July, Edsel and his college buddies followed the National Trails Road west. And in his journal from July 16th, 1915, he notes that they left Williams, Arizona that morning and arrived at the Brunswick Hotel in Kingman at midnight.
Wow.
He also noted that when he got to Needles, it was oppressively hot. Can you imagine that in July? It was hot in Needles.
That reminds me, in my dad's gas station in Kingman, the people would come in and first thing they would say is, have you got gold in your gas? The regular was 35.9. And then the second thing they would say, it was almost like clockwork, they would say, how far is it to California? And I'd be washing the windshield, and I'd say, 62 miles, sir. And they'd say, oh, great, I can't wait to get out of this godforsaken desert. And I didn't have the heart to tell them, they're going to cross the river into Needles where it's like 106 at midnight, Crazy.
You cross that river at Needles, and come summer, it's not hell, but if you squint hard, you can see it from there.
You can see it from there. That's true. Why is Route 66 such a big deal in Europe? I know you've been over there. Can you kind of flesh that out, why it's such a big deal?
Yeah, Route 66 isn't our most historic or most scenic highway, but from its very inception, it's always had the best press and publicity.
Yeah.
And the most amazing about Route 66 today, of course, is it doesn't exist. Officially, Route 66 hasn't existed since 85, but it has morphed into America's longest small town and theme park. And it's come to symbolize America, the quintessential American road trip. I had a gentleman from the Czech Republic I've gotten to know pretty well. He founded the Czech Route 66 Association. And he said growing up in Eastern Europe, watching bootleg copies of Easy Rider, listening to Radio Free Europe and hearing the song Route 66, he said those things for his generation came to symbolize the freedom that the Statue of Liberty had represented to another generation.
Wow, that is incredible. And my experience, Jim, was that my father had a gas station on Route 66, and my mother worked for the highway department. And in the summertime, I had a job as a stakeman on a survey crew putting in the new I-40. And so the road had no meaning to it. It was just a road. My parents made a living on it. We drove to school every day on it, so it wasn't a big deal. And it wasn't until about 2006, I think it was, my wife was stationed in Rota, Spain, and I went to visit her. And that's where Columbus set out on his second journey to the Americas with horses. And so I'm standing on the beach looking at that angry sea, and I'm thinking, man, those guys were brave to go out on that. And about a half an hour later, as I was commiserating, I turned around, and on the beach, I saw the Route 66 bar. And I thought, oh my, I get it. Columbus sent horses over here, and we sent a legend back. Isn't that amazing? Route 66 bar in Spain.
I'm like you. I cut my teeth. I learned to ride a bicycle on Route 66. I learned to drive trucks on Route 66. And during my John Wayne period, I drove Route 66 a lot, chasing rodeo stuff. And it was a road. That's it. And I still have trouble grasping how popular this road is. But I attended the second European Route 66 Festival. I spoke there in Zlin, the Czech Republic. And the reason you don't hear of Zlin, or they give away on game shows, is you can't get there from here. And there was about 20,000 people from 10 countries, including Brazil, celebrating Route 66, American music, and American cars.
Isn't that phenomenal? Now, you've done 22 books. May I ask, what's your most popular book?
Well, right now, some of the Route 66 titles, like say I started out writing books. I started out writing magazine articles on largely automotive topics, occasionally on Route 66 road trips, travel, and where they overlap, the history of Airstream trailers, things of that nature. I even did a book on the checkered cab manufacturing company, and that got me an interview with Jay Leno at his garage. And
he's a friend of yours. I've seen pictures of you with him all over the place. He's like a friend of yours.
Yeah, we talk every once in a while about cars and steam engines, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And as far as some of the popular books, like say the Ghost Towns of Route 66 has done really well. Murder and Mayhem. The Big Book of Car Culture I did some years back. That's received the bronze medal at International Automotive Media Awards. It was kind of like the Seinfeld television show. It was a big book about nothing. I wrote about the history of highway striping and seat belts and radial tires.
Now, what's interesting to me is that when I was growing up, at the same age, you being there, every Sunday we would go out to a ghost town for a picnic after church. And so we went out to White Hills, and there were still buildings there at the time. And we went to Chloride, of course, and Oatman, and Gold Road, and Signal, and on and on and on. And it was just so amazing to me as a little kid that these places, were ghost towns that people left, and it has such a kind of a pathos to it. And only now, when I return home to my town of Kingman, the ghost town looks like my town of Kingman looks like a ghost town. What do you have to say about that?
We're doing some changing down there. I mean, the last, and because of Route 66 as being a catalyst, the historic district's really getting a new lease on life. But I tell you, it's like pushing a wheelbarrow full of fat people up a hill with a flat tire. It's pretty damned exhausting trying to get things done.
Yeah.
But a lot of new businesses are moving in. They're renovating some of the old buildings.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this all along Route 66. Another thing that's really intriguing, Route 66 wise, is young people that are taking on the task of renovating a building that's been closed for 40 years, and they're renovating it, making it into an ice cream parlor or
Got
They're
it.
renovating Airstream trailers and putting together an Airbnb vintage trailer park. It's pretty
Hey,
exciting.
we're going to take a short break here. Stick around, Jim. We want to hear from some of our best friends. Okay, we're back here with Jim Hinckley, author of 22 books on Route 66. He is a wonderful receptacle of just outrageous information about two-lane tales. I really am impressed with all that you've done. Can you give us a little taste of what's in Murder and Mayhem on Route 66?
Well, yeah, that was a challenge because Route 66, like I say, has become America's longest theme park, and you don't want to find out that Goofy's an axe murderer. So I tried to not go too deep, but I found some amazing stories. I found one in New Mexico that really intrigued me. The short version, long story, two couples, they must have been modestly comfortable financially in the mid-30s. He ran a coal company in East St. Louis, and he and his wife and another couple, every year they would take a big road trip. And in 1937, they headed west along Route 66. We're going to go see the new Boulder Dam and then go to San Diego. And they disappeared. Somewhere around Tucumcari, New Mexico was the last postcard they sent. And their car turned up several months later. Their Nash, 29 Nash, turned up in near San Antonio, Texas. Some of their luggage was found burning near Albuquerque, and the rest of their luggage was found down near El Paso, but they were never seen again. And the part of the story that really intrigued me was an interview 10 years later with the FBI agent that had been involved. And he mentioned how much time they'd spent, how many files they'd put together. And he says, but they were stretched thin because they were investigating almost a dozen identical disappearances along Route 66 in New Mexico and Arizona.
So there was a serial killer, and it's never been solved? Is that
Never been solved. Nobody's ever been found.
Man, that is a spooky, spooky tale, isn't it?
So, Jim, where these folks would check into a roadside motel or one of the little cabin motels that was popular at that time period, and you think somebody would, lend them a hand or something like that, take advantage of them?
No way of knowing. They just flat disappeared. The last the FBI found, they had gotten gas along the highway in New Mexico, and they were mentioned that they were going to try to drive to Gallup that night, and that was it.
Wow, that's pretty spooky. But what's interesting is you compare Route 66 to a theme park, and I believe one of the biggest rides in Disneyland is Haunted House, isn't it? Isn't that
oh yeah,
the
definitely.
number one? So it probably deserves a place in this theme park that you're describing. Tell us a little bit about some of the renovations. I have to say, I've been so sad. I've been to Holbrook, been to Winslow recently, Ash Fork, Seligman, Truxton, Hackberry, Kingman, and it doesn't look good. It like I started to say, it's like they're turning into ghost towns almost.
Well, Ash Fork is really on the skids. Seligman, unfortunately, they're booming in Seligman, but they've turned it into kind of a I don't know what it is, kind of a caricature. Downtown Kingman, they're finishing up a nice infrastructure, sidewalks, streets, everything, landscaping on Beale Street. A nice couple, Tim and Lenore, have bought the gas station. I think it was Cox's gas station on the 2nd and Andy Devine.
Absolutely.
They've renovated that, and it's now Desert Outfitters. They've found an original Pegasus mobile gas thing they put on. The little stone building next to it was a cafe in the 30s. It's been closed for like 40 years.
Yeah.
They just remodeled that building. They've opened it as an ice cream parlor. And right next door to that, they've cleared the land. They have some renovated Airstream trailers that they're going to be putting in there in the next few months as Airbnb. And then they bought the little bar next to it, the old Denny Moore's bar.
Dinty Moore's. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, Fred Grigg, a good friend of mine I grew up with, he worked at the Cox gas station, I think for about 22 years. And across the street was Desert Drugs, where I bought True West magazine.
Yes.
When I was a kid. So that's a lot of history on that corner for me. You know what, Jim, we could talk to you all day. In fact, we're going to have you back as a guest. But I just think this is absolutely fantastic. You got a new book coming out?
Yeah, I'm actually working on 2 right now. I'm working on a Route 66 Centennial Anthology. Is one of the books I'm currently engaged with. Cool.
And what's the name of the other one? Can you tell us?
Yeah, the other one's a little bit different. I'm working on a book on, and Stan will appreciate this, working on alternative energy vehicles. Because it really surprised people to find out, for example, we were building gasoline-electric hybrid automobiles in 1896.
Well, who knows? It may just catch on. Hey, Jim, you're great. We'll catch up to you next time on Two Lane Tales.
Great talking to you, folks.
Well, Stuart, what did you think about that?
I really want to get out on the Route 66, and I'll tell you what, I'm in search of those ghosts. I think since I was 5 or 6 years old, sitting in the back of my parents' station wagon, staring, going across the desert, looking at those abandoned gas stations and little rock houses and wondering who lived there and, what happened there before. And so I really want to get out there and find these ghost towns, especially drive some sections of Route 66 I haven't driven. Including the route from Kingman to Seligman. That's on my top of my list.
I can set you up on that, and we'll have to connect with Jim up in Mojave County, and I think a road trip is due.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think that we're going to be searching for the spirits of Route 66 together here very soon.
Amen.